Hello. So we made it to the end of the semester, so this is going to be my final project video. This will be my first video. I will have two, one on each language myth. So this first video is on the language myth that America is ruining the English language. So the what and who of this language. So what is this myth? The myth is as stated, kind of. American English is ruining the English language. Americans are creating nonsense words that are in turn damaging the language to others. Who originally taught this? It was the British. Why? They thought this because in the early 17th century, when there was American colonialism and the British were colonizing the Americas, and same with a bunch of other countries, the people immigrating over here would take words from their old language, such as Dutch, and they would integrate it into their new English. And members of the British English speakers, they would think that it wasn't okay. And the book cites an example of a member of the British royal family, and he said that back in America they don't speak properly, and that it's ruining English, and that they should be speaking British English because British English is the best way to speak English, and that British English doesn't contain any of these new nonsense words. Well, that's not true. So the book goes on to debunk this by saying that there are no rules in linguistics that determine the certain worth or value of a language. There is not a golden rule sheet that says the do's and don'ts of a language. If you do these, a language is good. If you don't do these, a language is bad. If you do this, a language is bad. And if you don't do this, a language is good. That doesn't exist. So you can't really say one language is better than the other. You can in an opinion statement, but it can't be taken any more than an opinion statement. It can't be looked at as a fact. Some more evidence the book uses to debunk this is that if you look at modern British language and you compare it to past British language, and you look at modern American English and you look at past English, they're both very different from what they originally were. And different is totally okay. Different is welcomed, actually. It's always good to have variation. So, like, for example, the book cites more evidence as to why British is different than American. British English is different than American English. For example, the Americans tend to keep our R's. We're very particular about the way our R sound. So the book uses the word of mother and how we have the sound, whereas the British might opt out of that or omit it, kind of. In British English, they have these things called tag questions, where they have a statement and then a question at the end, like, I did the laundry today, didn't I? Almost antagonistically, but not necessarily all the time, but that's a integral part of their language that we usually don't have here in America. The book does mention, however, that Americans may be more innovative in their language, but that this might be purely coincidental, as there are 5 times more English speakers in America than there are in Britain. So to put this in perspective, if you have one innovator out of every 10,000 or so people, in America there's going to be much more innovators in innovation due to the sheer amount of numbers, the sheer amount of higher numbers that we have here when we look at Britain. And that percentage-wise, it might be the exact same, but just because we have more people, it can be thought that, oh, we are more innovative. So it's not necessarily true. It might be true. There's no way to truly prove it. But moving on, an outside source of information on this, we had the TED Talk in class from the woman named Anne Curzan, and she was a linguist who sat on the panel for Merriam-Webster and helped determine word of the year, which new words should be added to the dictionary. And she described words like LOL and Chad as being added to the dictionary, and those words kind of are slang, and you would have never really thought them to be added to the dictionary, but enough people have used them, and it's become so much part of our common inventory that why shouldn't it be added to the dictionary? And that dictionaries have to keep up with our ever-evolving language and the culture of modern society. These words like LOL and Chad would have thought to have been damaging to the language by the British in the 17th century, the same way the words of the Dutch were. But in today's world, it's widely accepted to be using these words. I can't say for certain, but I imagine people in Britain are using the same words we use here, like LOL and Chad. Those are pretty common. So for evidence from the Language Files book, it states that a language change is not bad, but that is simply natural for a language to evolve. The book uses the Our Father prayer as an example. So the book has the prayer from the 1100s, 1400s, 1600s, and today. And it's slightly changing going down the line, but in the grand scheme of things, a little change and a little change here and a little change there, when looked at entirely, is going to be a big change from start to finish. And you can kind of see where we came from if you go step by step, but at the end of the day, it's conveying the same message. So even though it's conveying the same message and it's a little bit different, it's totally okay. Different is okay, as I've said. America was once thought to be the melting pot of cultures, with various immigrants from around the world coming to find a better opportunity. So you had people from Italy coming, people from Ireland, China, Eastern European countries like Serbia, and they, similar to the immigrants in the colonial era, were borrowing words and putting it in their common day English, and they would pass that on to their children, and their children would meet other immigrants' children, and they would get married, have a family, and so on and so forth. And then you're going to have this big cultural tree of an evolved language, because so many people are just borrowing and adding things to the new language. And so that, more or less, in simpler terms, is thought to be the family tree and or wave theory. And that is cited in Language Files as one of the reasons for language change. Another reason cited for change in the text is that sound changes will eventually lead to morphological changes as well. And the book used the change of how we used to say clomb as the past tense of climb, but now we say climbed. Over time, we just stopped using clomb and we started saying climb due to sound changes and whatever, whatnot, so on and so forth. And the same can be said for word formation and sentence structure. That sentence structure and word formation in Old English are totally different than they are today. So one more piece of outside information. I have just some things a woman named Betty Berner said. Betty Berner was a member of the Linguistic Society of America, and in her article she wrote on their website, she says that language may change because of new technologies and experiences, and that if no current word can accurately describe those new technologies or experiences, a new word is then created. Because if no current word can efficiently and clearly describe it, then a new word should be created. Betty then goes on to explain that there is no one proper dialect of English, and that those who claim that certain dialects are sloppy or lazy are making false claims. She says each dialect has its own governing set of rules, and those rules determine how and what is said. So kind of going back to what I said earlier and the debunking from the language book, there are no golden set of rules that says this makes a language good and this makes a language bad. Language is different, and different's okay. So that's the first video, and we'll move on to the second one next.